What's up, football fans? Welcome to another extra episode. Can't even get my own words out today. Man, it's been that kind of a day. Welcome to another episode of The Extra Point. Stoked to have my buddy Kendall here again. If you were jumping in the show last night, you were able to see him. He'll be back again tonight here. I'll bring him up to the stage in just a couple minutes as we dive into another auction startup draft. Similar format to the one that we streamed last night, 25 roster. We're going to be looking at 10 starters, 15 bench, 6-point passing touchdown, single quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, triple flex. Y'all know the deal. Without further ado, Kendall, what's up, my man? Good to see you again. I feel like I haven't seen you in 8 hours.
Yeah, something like that. Man,
7 hours?
Was crazy. That was a brutal realization. Chat. So me and Phil are in different time zones, right? So I don't know when the draft started for you, but our auction draft started for me at 9:30. And then after we're wrapping up, we're still talking about how the draft went in like post-production, post-live stream. And I didn't get to bed till like 2:30 yesterday. So it's been a weird day for me, but I'm so ready to go. It feels like a Saturday, like a weekend. Like it's really weird because you don't do back-to-back 4-hour drafts often. But dude, I'm locked in. I'm ready to go. So glad to be here with you and the people.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I love having you on the show. It's always a good time to hang out and talk some football. I mean, it feels weird because we text throughout the day and we just kind of go about our our normal conversations, and then I get to see you, obviously, and we're going to jump into another draft here tonight. We're going to jump in here in just a couple minutes. Obviously, I'll bring the draft board up to the main screen. But yeah, just really quickly before we start this draft here, forget about last night's draft. Obviously, there's a ton of people watching the show who maybe didn't catch it, and this may be their first opportunity to see an auction draft, or they've been through 1 or 2 auction drafts, and this is their opportunity to kind of get a better sense of hey, if I'm going to do another auction, learn some things. So again, kind of similar to last night, anything that you kind of go into an auction draft with, any thoughts or any sort of strategies that you feel are probably pretty important for folks to learn about?
Yeah, I think in auction, like the 2 main strategies, there's a lot of offshoots, right? But there's your studs and duds, right? Which is very common. It's particularly effective in a 10-team league where you have to be truly elite to really win because everyone's pretty good condensed rosters, right? Or there's the value sniper, if you will, where it's I'm going to be super water. I'm going to take all the values and see what comes to me. And you do end up like a roster construction standpoint, a little bit wonky, a little bit lopsided, but you do typically have just an accumulation of good assets. I think those are kind of the 2 ways, and you got to learn when to pivot in and out of them.
Yeah, love that. And I think for we'll just kind of make this point, and then we'll get this draft going here. I know guys have got some itchy finger figures. They got $500 in their pocket, and they're ready to spend some cash. I love what you just said. I think the studs and duds approach, kind of stars and scrubs, however you want to call it. Obviously you could be looking at a win now team. You could be looking to just get young assets and build for the future. So for folks that are listening, that are live, obviously, if you're listening to me here on Patreon or on Spotify for just the audio, tune in next week because we're going to go through kind of a breakdown of what these drafts look like. We'll go through a little bit of recap of each of the managers' teams. We'll talk through maybe, some ideas that, I have about ways that you could trade to improve your roster. Are you a win now team? Are you building for the future? And obviously, we'll kind of go through some more of that roster construction as well. So super excited for this. And I know, like I said, we've got a couple guys here with money in the pocket and a 10-team league here tonight. And it looks like Duncan here is going to be our first nomination. So we are going to go ahead and kick this thing off. 30-second nominations, 30-second rounds of bidding. For those that are unfamiliar with auction, in this opportunity here, is different than a snake draft. You can nominate anybody that you want. So Justin Jefferson looks like number 1 in the rankings. That can certainly be someone that you pick. But again, you have access to all of the players instead of just that draft position where if you're in the top half of the draft in a single quarterback or a super flex, you probably have a pretty good idea of who you're going to be able to draft and who's going to be in that range. And then, of course, as we continue to go through the draft throughout the night, once guys start to spend money, you'll see different strategies start to come out. So looks like Drake London going to be the first nominee here tonight. Excited for how this goes. Kendall, thoughts on Drake London? He was, Drake London to the moon after the Kirk Cousins trade. His stock's still pretty high, but I know I actually got him in a draft last night. How do you feel about Drake London going into the season, and then also his long-term value for Dynasty?
Yes, I love his long-term value. I mean, I think regardless of what happens, he's so young and he's so talented even if it all went horrible for him, I think the talent still like showed through. Whereas like JSN he had some things not go his way. The talent didn't exactly shine through. So like with Drake London, I'm very confident that the pedigree of player that I think he is very apparent. So that kind of gives him a safe long-term floor from his value insulation. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of the previous, coaching staff who was, right. I think if you just get more modern, kind of nuanced offense set up there. I mean, he's a good route runner and he's good in the red zone. He's just good at so many different things. I think he's going to be fantastic. That being said, I don't want to buy the ridiculous overhype. But if there's a player where I'm like, you know what, I think I would rather be with the hype than against it, I think Drake London, the hype is definitely real. For sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think we're not going to talk about Michael Penix tonight. I don't even want to go down that road. We've had that conversation. We will have that conversation more and more, especially throughout training camp and as we get into the preseason games. But I do think Drake London's biggest challenge has been quarterback play. I know that's a very obvious statement, but I think the reason folks were so excited about London was simply because of the fact that we saw the talent, we've seen the potential, and he's so young, right? And you want, obviously in Dynasty, you want some longevity. I know you and I talk a lot about playing Dynasty in a 2 to 3 year window. I do see Drake London as a second contract player. I also think at the end of the day, he's going to have a nice uptick in overall performance, yardage, and touchdowns this season, knowing that Kirk Cousins is an obvious upgrade over Desmond Ridder and fill in the blank quarterback. So to me, Drake London going off the board at $70 is a steal of a price. I'll be honest, I was in on that bid and got a little distracted talking to you. I might kick myself later, but that's okay. But yeah, I think to your point about not overhyping it and maybe not going having too much overexposure, curb your bets, hedge your bets a little bit. I think with London, he's certainly a player I want to buy, but at the same time, again, I don't want to be overly exposed to a player where, look, if it doesn't go well for any reason, that's going to knock a lot of my teams, potentially down as we move into the second half of the season and the playoffs. Big news today, and let's kind of switch gears from wide receiver to quarterback. Bijan Robinson, for those following along, going off the board here as player number 3 for 101. Foundational piece, probably the overall RB1 here in Dynasty. Big news today, just breaking a couple minutes ago from Adam Schefter. Trevor Lawrence, 5 years, $275 million. I haven't dove into what the guarantees and all of that looks like. I just kind of saw the quick headline because we were jumping in. Thoughts on Trevor Lawrence's long-term value, and does this contract, does it influence how you think about Trevor Lawrence moving forward in a dynasty format?
Oh, sorry, I was totally focused.
Are you bidding? Are you bidding on Chase? Do I need to keep Jamar Chase?
I was between do I answer or oh man, do I let this one go? That was that was a close one, man. I almost hit you back with another question, hey, Jamar Chase, is he I should have thought about it before we actually got into this spot, but Chase might secretly be my I don't know why I didn't just take him there. I think he might be my wide receiver 1 right now. It's kind of occurring to me as I'm getting through my thought process that the stable QB, the fact that T. Higgins is leaving at some point, what could happen to Jamar Chase next year going into year 25, 26 he could have a ridiculous Megatron season that is just waiting in the wings. And I feel I kind of want to invest in Chase while he's caught up in this sort of muddly, ultra tier 1, right?
Yeah. I have him as my wide receiver 2 right now in my rankings. I have it CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and then Amon-Ra as my top 4. So I don't think that a wide receiver 1's, overall wide receiver 1 is out of the cards. I think the problem with Jamar Chase hitting that overall wide receiver 1 is he's had injuries and Joe Burrow has had some injuries. So if they can both stay healthy, I think it's absolutely in the range of outcomes. We've got Tresnor here saying Burrow going to have a comeback year too. No one's paying attention. I agree with that. I'll be honest. I've got Joe Burrow in a couple of leagues. I'm in on Joe Burrow. It's not a secret. You can't hide, oh, Joe Burrow's good at football. But I do think a fully healthy Joe Burrow with, a Zach Moss, who I don't really see him as a major downgrade from, sorry, I'm betting on AJ Brown here. My brain just went blank. From Joe Mixon. Sorry, I had to kind of switch back and forth in my gears here.
I did the same thing, man. You got to get used to we did the same thing yesterday. We're I know we got to figure out. You eventually get used to the takes and the bidding, but man, the first 5 minutes is just chaos.
Everyone's got money right now, it's like everyone's hot and ready to spend some cash. But yeah, I don't see Zach Moss as an upgrade over Joe Mixon. And what I mean by that quite simply is I think he'll have a role in this offense, but I think you're going to see a Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, assuming that Higgins is still nothing happens and he's still on the team this season. I think you're going to see a really big uptick for the both of them. And if you have good health, I do think a overall wide receiver one season is absolutely in the range of outcomes for Jamar Chase. So to me, I don't think it's a problem if somebody's in a snake draft and wants to invest their first round pick. If you're in an auction draft and you want to invest some healthy capital, I don't have a problem with that at all. Back to my Trevor Lawrence question, because we were chatting about that before we got distracted here. Thoughts on, Trevor Lawrence and again, 5 years, $275 million. Does that change your opinion of him? And how does that, maybe look for his future, in a dynasty format?
Yeah. So I think with him, it's very simple. We already expected this to happen. We were acting like it already happened before it happened. So whatever you felt about Burrow from a production standpoint, from what the offense could be, what his overall talent level is, what do you think he's going to do, really shouldn't change at all. If you were already kind of down on Burrow, you shouldn't use this as I should probably change my mind a little bit. You're finding an excuse to be on the positive side of things. But if you're right, you're still going to be right at the end of the day. There's it's just a run-of-the-mill transaction. It's fun to see it in the news, but from a fantasy football perspective, it happened exactly the way it was supposed to. It doesn't change the team dynamic. Yeah. It doesn't change his dynamic. If anything, it's just a reminder to the entire market that, look, some people have elite safe floors because not just, in fantasy, we get our heads wrapped around certain players and almost an unlimited amount of forgiveness.
You are on the clock for a nomination here. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure you don't lose your turn here.
No, you're all good. I got you. So but you know how it is, right? There's some takes where it's even if the player has this or that, the community was so set on the pedigree and this and that we are going to champion them for longer than they should, and it's just always going to be a thing. I think that happens at the coaching level, the NFL, where Trevor Lawrence, there's a lot of excuses for why it's kind of been underwhelming at times, but I think it's been unanimously positive overall, the vibes you get from coaches. I don't think anyone is going to let him be anything less than still a star NFL player until he's 40. So that's just an elite level of safe floor and longevity that you just don't get everywhere. Yeah. Right. And so I think that it's a reminder to them in the market. I think him getting paid like that, probably in the market, it elevates guys like Justin Herbert. It elevates guys like Brock Purdy. When you just remember oh, you know what? These just guys that the franchise is going to be about for the next 10 plus years. Right. It's a reminder that, you know what? This feels good. This feels good.
I was thinking about Tua a lot today, actually, separate from this Trevor Lawrence contract, because he hasn't gotten paid yet as on an extension. And I do think that's coming. And I think now, obviously, having seen what kind of money Trevor's getting, it's interesting because I think I have Tua ahead of Trevor Lawrence in my rankings. I know that may be not a hot take, but I think to some people that may not be they may say that's wrong, and that's fine. I'm always okay being wrong. This is Dynasty, it's fantasy football, it should be fun. We're not going to predict every single player. But I also think at the end of the day, to me, what this money says is we're committed to you. That's fairly obvious. I feel like, and I've said this to you before, and I'll say it here on the show, I feel like I'm down on the Jaguars. You know what I mean? I don't think they got better this offseason. I don't believe losing Calvin Ridley and replacing him with Gabe Davis is an upgrade. I like Etienne, I think he's solid. I don't think he repeats as the overall RB3. I mean, there's just so much variance. If my stats are correct, it's like 2.7 running backs that finished in the top 10 will repeat as top 10 running backs the following year. So to me, I don't see a world where, Etienne finishes as the overall RB1 and Trevor Lawrence supports a wide receiver 1. I think Christian Kirk had kind of a up and down season before he got hurt. He was, hot at times. He was cold at times. I just don't have a vision of, excuse me, I have to nominate someone here, but let's go ahead and put Etienne here on the board. Speaking of Etienne, I just don't have a vision where I see Trevor Lawrence consistently finishing, as a top 5 guy. I think he'll be a QB1. I think he'll kind of be in that QB1, QB2 range. But unless they go out and draft or trade for a major marquee signing, I just don't see it being a big season, for Jacksonville. And again, in that division, I have them pegged to finish 3rd in that division. I think CJ Stroud and Houston are probably going to be the top team again. And we, you and I are both pretty high on Anthony Richardson and the Colts offense with JT and healthy Michael Pittman, bringing in AD Mitchell. So I do think that the Colts and the Jaguars will be kind of fighting for that second position in the South there. So yeah, good. I mean, good for Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, get your money. Like you said, I don't see how anybody is surprised by this, but I don't think it changes my opinion of the player, in terms of how I view him long term. Whereas like a Nico Collins, let's switch gears for a minute here. Like Nico Collins, to me, securing a big payday, to me, that says we value you the same as Trevor Lawrence money values him. But there was questions in Houston about Nico Collins. Was he going to be the long-term wide receiver 1? Tank's on a rookie contract. Stroud's on a rookie contract. They voided the last couple of years of Diggs' contract. Would Diggs get a big payday? So what do you feel about Nico? And maybe not just Nico specifically, but like other wide receivers or tight ends or running backs that are getting, big paydays. Does that maybe make you feel a little bit more secure in drafting some of those players versus a Trevor Lawrence who we knew would get paid?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting point there. I'm going to respond with like a question though.
Yeah.
So do you see a big difference in like your take between Trevor Lawrence, the NFL player, and Trevor Lawrence, the fantasy football asset?
I think this is a little bit of a cop-out answer, but it is how I would answer it if it wasn't, just someone like you. And I think Trevor Lawrence is better for the NFL than he is for fantasy. Like, I think he is more valuable to the Jaguars. I think he is a good quarterback.
Would agree with that.
Yeah, I think Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. I'm not sitting here poo-pooing the guy. I mean, I'm going to poo-poo Zach Wilson. He's not Zach Wilson, right? Like, he's not a bust. He has not developed into the overall number 1 prospect we expected him to be. Ask me a question in 3 years about Caleb Williams. We don't know what Caleb Williams is going to become. Is he going to become the next Patrick Mahomes? Which I hate that comparison. I think that's so unfair to the kid, but we'll talk about that another time. But like, I just think that Trevor Lawrence is better in real life for the NFL than he is for fantasy. And like I said a couple minutes ago, I just don't see Trevor Lawrence as a top 5 guy. I don't see the path.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Sorry, I'm busy lamenting I don't know why I just spent $100 on Breece Hall, if I'm being honest.
I didn't even see that go off the board. I was in on Marv there for a minute, and then I was kind of talking to you, and I saw him go off at 101, and I was like, well, that's a bummer. But I have a league where my team was not so good last year, and I was graced with the 101 in a single quarterback snake draft. So the rookie draft this year, Mr. Marvin Harrison was my overall number 1 pick. So I have some exposure to Marv, and shame to not get him here tonight. But Tim Bay with Christian McCaffrey and Marvin Harrison. So he's got a hero RB, and he's got a very solid again, I don't love this term either, but generational tight end at Marvin Harrison. I like what Tim Bay is doing there with his first couple of purchases with his picks. Breece Hall for $100, you're going to be just fine. We're talking about an RB2, RB3.
I mean, it's like
overall
it's at market. My question for you is, so I think this is something that's very nuanced and interesting and makes auction the spice of life. Me and you are obviously auction nuts, but for the crowd that's viewing, right? Having a debate on who is your tier, how close is your tier and how far apart is your tier between the top 3 RBs, between Gibbs, Bijan, and Breece. Do you see it a certain way? Do you see a risk and a weird range of outcomes where in an auction draft where you have pretty incredible control? And I think the 3 of them, like, one sets the price for the other 2. So If anything, Bijan usually gets nominated first, and then the other two end up being slightly more expensive. So Bijan's usually the better get because he's usually slightly cheaper, honestly, than the other two. Do you have a big preference on one or the other? How do you rank those three? Is there a big pitfall that you're like, hey, I stay away from this one because of this? What are sort of the interesting takes within that group? From an auction standpoint, you really can call your shot on one of those three and really benefit if you're right, and obviously save yourself if you're wrong. Me and you are hero RB guys where we don't like drafting a lot of running backs. So it helps to take one sure thing for a long time so you can draft less. What is your thoughts on the top three? Help me talk through this, because Breece is probably my RB3 in that group, and that's why you're seeing the face of like, why did you go for Breece? He's your least favorite. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, man. I think you're talking about nuanced, subtle differences. Sorry, I was listening to you. I was also in a bidding war here for CeeDee Lamb, and I think it has gotten to a point now where I'm just gonna have to say, Nick, you've beaten me, man. I want CeeDee, but this is a long way to go. I think when I look at ceiling performances and tiers, and I'm going to be doing a whole show probably in about a month. I'll be honest. I've got some other content that I think is more valuable for listeners and for viewers right now, but I am going to be doing a show kind of about tier rankings, and to kind of preview a little bit of that will answer your question. I think you have to look at who has the ability to be the overall number one at their position when you're talking about guys that you're asking about: Bijan, Gibbs, Breece. To me, Bijan, we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen it from Gibbs yet. We haven't seen it, from Breece yet. But can they be the overall number one? Yes, I think Breece was the RB2, so it's pretty darn good. But my point is that can Gibbs be the overall RB1? Yes, I think he can. Can he be there with Monty in tow? I don't know. I still have Gibbs as my RB3 overall, potentially RB4, depending on how I view CMC. But to me, the top four running backs are Bijan, Gibbs, Breece, and CMC. I would probably have Gibbs slightly ahead of Christian McCaffrey because of the age, right? And the potential to have a 5-year window instead of maybe a 2 or 3 year window. What I look at is yes, Tyler Algier is there. Yes, there's new coaches, but I think let's talk, crazy Arthur Smith for a second. I think at the end of the day, Raheem Morris has said with his words, and we will see with his actions, get the ball to Bijan. So I think he has the easy answer is, can he be the overall RB1? Yes. He has the talent. He has the opportunity. Can Breece be the overall RB1? Yes. I put Bijan ahead of Breece for the simple fact that I think Atlanta's offense is going to be better than the Jets. You have similarities at the quarterback position, both older guys coming off of Achilles tears, but I like the weapons that Atlanta has better than the weapons that New York has. Obviously, Garrett Wilson's on the board here right now, and I love Garrett Wilson, but outside of Garrett Wilson, who's the wide receiver 2 in New York? It's Breece, right? Like, who's the second running back in New York? I don't know. I mean, like, I do know, but like, nobody cares because there's not someone that's going to take could Braylon Allen steal some goal line work? Sure, it's possible. With Gibbs, I love Gibbs. I have him in a ton of places on my teams. But again, as long as Monty's there, I see Gibbs as a top 5 guy, not the overall RB1. For you to get Breece Hall for $100 and Bijan to go for $101, fantastic. I think it's a great price for him. I don't think you can have any complaints about that at all. So, what do you? I mean, when you look at tiers, when you look at separating the nuances of guys like that, what stands out for you? What are some of the things you're trying to nitpick to decide between a Breece, a Bijan, and a Gibbs?
I'm looking at the things that could drastic. Oh my goodness, I meant to hit the button. That's such a steal.
Sorry, I missed it.
Guys, by the way, don't stream and draft. This is not the faint of heart over here. Okay? You want to win your league, don't do what me and Phil are doing right now. We're doing this because we're degenerates. We love talking fantasy football. We honestly love talking about fantasy football. We'll get the chat involved here for sure. I know we're doing
for sure. Yeah, I'm gonna bring up the chat here in a minute.
Everyone who watches a lot of fantasy football content, if you're just a nerd like me, where I try to watch everybody, I watch the small shows, the big shows. I just love a good nuanced debate, whether I agree with it or completely disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just all about it. I have never had more appreciation for the difficulties between trying to take what's in your head on a player, on a question, and also keep track of the nuances of an auction draft. is kind of insane. I think we've done this with mock drafts, and it's no problem. If it was like a regular like Dynasty startup, I feel like it's no problem. It's auction in particular is just such an amazing thing. And thanks for being here, guys. By the way, like auction content is just not really a thing in the space. So like, I love that Phil is doing this because it's not easy. I see why people wouldn't do it.
And this is where I've honestly, I think I've found a bit of a niche, like that's Dynasty is not new, but it is newer to some. And there's a ton of people from the redraft community and from the best ball community that are just kind of exploring Dynasty for the first time. I look at kind of the lineage of, the progression of your fantasy football of I'm in the home league with the snake draft, and I'm going to just kind of go through, each and every year. Well, I'd like to try to explore a little bit more and what's kind of not a ton of time, but like something I could do. To me, it's like snake draft, home league, then you get into best ball. And then after you feel like you have a good footing in the two of those, then you kind of enter the dynasty realm. You're right. You and I've done a million mocks, together. Shout out to our boys at Get Right Fantasy Network. It's so easy to do a mock and talk because one, you have a pretty good sense of where you are, in a snake draft of who's going to be on the board, players in your range, who am I targeting, who's going to get back to me. But when you're in this auction, man, you got to track the draft and you got to manage a budget and forget talking about, doing a show, just the guys that are not on the show that are just doing this. Like, it gets a little nervy, right? I mean, I think you're seeing some guys that say, there's different strategies. Do I want to spend early and get my guys? Do I want to wait and save a lot of money? And then is that a good strategy? Because then I have a ton of money and I'm just kind of collecting, wide receiver 3s and 4s at the end of the draft. Like, to me, there's a ton of strategy. So I think I found a little niche here. I do a ton of auctions to start my dynasty leagues more so than I do snake because I like to have access to all the players instead of being, pigeonholed at the 111, or the 101, whatever it is on one of the turns, stuck in the middle. But yeah, I think this is a cool space, and I hope that we have more and more listeners who are, asking questions, getting involved. Obviously, subscribe, follow the show. Speaking of comments, we haven't
just gonna go there. Read my mind, man.
In a minute. Oh, I have to nominate someone. Excuse me.
Do your thing
for 79. That's a really good price, Rose Mitchell. I love that price, man. That's
dude. JT is gonna shoot back up. I'm kind of spicy on JT. I think JT is like so solidly the RB4, but
yeah,
this is dynasty. But in redraft, I think JT is being slept on. Like he could finish as the RB1, and it oh man, I think he's gonna have.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It's not even like it's such a rote take to say like it wouldn't surprise me because like the deeper you get into this thing, there's a whole tier that wouldn't surprise me. I think, sure. Man, I think he's every take that the common takes on JT are rushing quarterback. He's going to get touchdowns poached, right? It's going to be it's a run first offense, but without the touchdown upside. I think that's trash. If I'm being honest, I think NFL coaches are going to know that like JT's your punching bag. Fuck it, I'm gonna go Puka. I'm gonna go for him.
I'll jump in here while you jump on the bidding train here for Puka Nacua.
I want some Puka.
I have JT as my RB5, just behind Christian McCaffrey as my RB4. I am on the side of he is going to get some touchdowns poached from Anthony Richardson. And I don't say that to be part of the crowd. I say that because I believe very highly in Anthony Richardson. I've drafted him in a lot of places. I've got him in some auction leagues where I've bid for him. Anthony Richardson did something, a very small sample size. We all know that. But I think Anthony Richardson showed in a very limited sample, he can be the overall QB1, right? He's done some things that, quite frankly, only Josh Allen has done. So I also see the other side of it where, do they really want to, potentially risk Richardson's body coming off of this surgery? They've got a lot of money and capital invested into him. We expect him to be the future of the Colts and a second contract player. So do they say, you know what, Richardson, we're giving it to JT on the goal line, ground and pound, kind of the Colts around the damn ball, as the hats like to say. I could see it going both ways. But since you're not on the clock here, go ahead and finish your JT. Finish your JT take.
So here's my JT take. Okay, I think the market is softening him for a couple of reasons. Right, one, they don't see him as an elite pass catcher. He's not an elite pass catcher. Okay, but he does catch passes. There's a big difference between he doesn't get looks and man, can he handle that? He was an all-purpose player. He still is. He can catch passes. There's been plenty of games where people we're like, wow, he caught 5 catches. It's like, guys, it's not the first time he's caught several passes. He's not a 2-minute drill guy. I get that. But he's still extraordinarily capable and is a very, very high catch rate when it comes to pass catching, right? He also has breakaway speed. I think this is a big, big deal. This is why Kenneth Walker won't ever plummet in my rankings despite having a very, very competent RB2. It's the same reason why T. Higgins still goes high in drafts. And it's that with the way kind of modern offenses sort of work, right? The fact that if he beats the last man, he's gone, that's a big difference. There's a lot of guys where it's not happening. They're elusive, they're fast twitch, but they don't have that track star top end speed to just take it to the house, right? Now, I don't know what his top end speed is coming off of the injuries, right? I haven't followed all of the analytics. I don't even trust him, to be honest, but I know he is a class of player that can break away. I think one of the BDGEs, the big dog gotta eat guys, was talking about this the other day. Shout out to, I don't remember which one it was, but shout out to him for bringing this up, where it's like, look, if he doesn't need red zone touches, he can absolutely run one in from 40, 50 out. And the fact that that's going to come up 2-3 times a year and create these big spike plays, 10, 20 points is absolutely going to be a big separator when it comes to the elite tier. And I think stuff like that is going to be, it's going to be a big deal. So yeah, I'm kind of high on Taylor. It's in a weird way, like I'm super high on him in redraft. I'm low on him in Dynasty, only because like I would buy him in Dynasty. I'd buy the dip, but I don't know if I can pay a huge price on him, knowing that if I don't know I'm competing, I don't know how much longer he has, given that he had a lot of touches in college. He has a lot of tread on those tires.
So let's talk about, I think it's interesting because you say you're really in on him on redraft, but not in on Dynasty. We had a trade in one of the leagues. You and I are in 3 or 4 leagues together. And one of the leagues that we had, sorry, I will let you jump in on Neighbors here. I'll preface this because I want you to get your take on this. But for the folks listening, for the folks watching, we had a trade this morning that came through, and Team A received Bijan Robinson and a 3rd-round pick. Team B received Neighbors for 90. Nice.
I didn't really want Neighbors for 90, but I'll take it.
There's worse players to have, my man.
I'll take Garrett Wilson for 84 above Neighbors. I'll put it that way.
All right. Sorry. So recapping here, Team A received Bijan Robinson and a 2025 3rd. Team B received Justin Taylor. Not Justin Taylor, Phil. That's incorrect. Jonathan Taylor. Let's try that again. Jonathan Taylor and a 1st-round pick. Which side of the trade are you on there?
This was the Bijan for JT in the 1st.
Yeah.
I'm on the Bijan side.
Okay. Why?
I'd say I'm on the Bijan side, like value win. I'd say I'm more than 10%, like general points. I try to give myself sort of a general like range of outcomes and like value perspective, like based on my takes on the players and how they help my team. This is important to know the league settings. It is 10 team. Mm-hmm. Okay. In 10 team, I think highest, like top of the tier, like tier 1, the 101 type of players make a little bit more of a difference. Elite ceilings make a little bit of a difference. So I think he gets a bump in that type of a format. Also, 2nd-round picks get a little bit of a bump, which kind of devalues first to a tiny degree. It's tiny, but it's there. It's worth mentioning.
Yep.
But that being said, it's like you're getting like almost clearly the 101 for the 104 at the position, if that makes sense. And it's only costing you, I mean, it's a 1st-round pick, but you're also buying yourself 3 years to get to that age. So if you could say I have 3 extra years of prime Bijan versus whatever I get in the 1st, if you're already a good drafter, and I know he drafted a good team, so there's a lot of context to this. His team is good. Your team's already good, then getting better is the tough part, right? Like getting good is one part, but getting great is the next level. You have to make trades like this to get great, in my opinion, or you have to rely on, hey, I'm the best drafter that's ever lived. This 1st-round pick is going to be the greatest 1st-round pick that's ever happened. It's a 1 quarterback league.
Yeah.
First round picks in 1 QB leagues are significantly devalued because there's no have to take the quarterback here. Your positional player values in the second half of the draft are significantly worse. It's a big thing to mention this year. The reason you get players as late and as good as they are is only because there's 3 quarterbacks early. It doesn't happen very often. So that's why I take the Bijan side.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'll just kind of add a little little sprinkle on top of your point there. I mentioned that league where I got Marvin Harrison, where I had the 101. Well, obviously I had the 201. I actually traded. I don't remember what the trade was off the top of my head, but I ended up having the 202 as well. I was able to grab Jaden Daniels at the 202 to be my backup quarterback to replace Geno Smith with Anthony Richardson as my QB1. Right. That's why my team on paper is not bad in that league. I lost Anthony Richardson in a 1 quarterback league last year. So my season was mostly poo-poo because Geno wasn't great. Right. So to me, it's an interesting point that you bring up about, number one, having the little bit of a devalue because the 111 and 112 in a 12-team format are the 201 and 202. So you're still getting a top 12 first round technically player in a 10-team league. I think it's really difficult in a 1 quarterback league to draft a quarterback early unless you really believe in him when there's so many premium wide receivers and running backs. So I with you on the Bijan side. If I could get Bijan and I end up having a tough season and I'm in the early stages of a 1 quarterback, 101 to 104 range, I'm probably grabbing another running back to pair with him or a really top wide receiver, knowing that my quarterback will be probably pretty competent moving forward. So the one thing, Kendall, we haven't talked about, I think I'm looking at my board here, only Kate Otten off the board for $2 and Sam Laporta at, $65. I didn't see that. Wow. So 2 tight ends off the board. This is not tight end premium, this league. But what are your thoughts on tight end premium? I know that's becoming more and more popular to try to even out the position. I know you have a little bit of a different stance on tight ends than I do, but for the folks that are listening, what are some of the values that they should be looking for at the tight end position? And don't have to give away your strategy tonight, by the way.
I'm giving away my strategy. I have put myself in. If you're gonna lean into the let's do commentary, let's do some fun content, hang out with my very, very good buddy Phil, and also these great people in chat. By the way, thank you for being.
We're gonna get to the chat, I promise.
That love. Yeah, we are gonna get to more of that too, for sure. Well, it's just thank you guys. Like, we're all degenerates. We love 4 hours of drafting. Let's go. You guys are all absolute crushers. Like,
you are our people.
I mean, I didn't mean to take a little aside and be like, the Dynasty fantasy community is a bunch of absolute legends, but you absolutely are. I will buy the first round at any bar that we're at. They're just the salt of the earth people here. Absolutely loving it. But
before you buy rounds of drinks, you are on the clock for a nomination.
All right, someone go buy Kyron. Take him away from me.
There you go.
Love Kyron. I live 15 minutes away from Notre Dame. Love me some Kyron, just not in Dynasty. Okay, I'm sorry. That being said, so tight end premium. I do think 0.5 tight end premium, I think is, how we kind of the longer we do fantasy football, the more it's become this garage thing to a mainstream industry with DFS. It's a huge thing. And as we get better at it, or I should say, as we get more popular with it, really smart people start to figure out how to make it more enjoyable, but also more competitive, kind of aligning the rule sets and the way we play the game and the styles that we play the game to be competitive and fun in the mixes, right? And having some rule sets that are more competitive versus less, increasing and decreasing variance. There's all these things. Juan Taco, I think Juan Taco's Thursby, right? I mean, he's clearly a poker player. A lot of fantasy football players are clearly poker players. So we're very familiar with, game theory types of stuff. I think that tight end premium at 0.5 right now is my preferred scoring setting. If you want to go above or below, I like at least a little bit of a bump to tight end. I think it makes the position more interesting. In my opinion, at 0 tight end premium, with the way the position functions, even in an elevated passing league where tight ends have never been more popular, when you look at Super Bowl winning teams, I think over the last 5-6 years, there hasn't been a Super Bowl winner that hasn't had any elite tight ends. When it comes to being an elite NFL team, you need to have some tight end play that makes a difference. I still think without 0.5 premium, they don't enter flex consideration enough to be considered kind of a neutral swap at flex. And because of that, it makes it a true one-off in a league where you can start this position in the flex, but you'll never do it. Yeah. That I think is a problem from a game theory standpoint. So you need to make it worth a flex spot often enough, in my opinion, that drafting additional players at the position, when they're not backups, they're legitimate starter level value. I think it adds some nuance to your roster construction where you can spend extra at RB knowing you're going to suffer at wide receiver, but wait, flex will be solved by tight end value. That is a really interesting pivot that doesn't always happen.
Is that your phone that keeps buzzing like that? What am I hearing?
Is that me?
Something is. I was like, is this like something in my headphones, or like something is going on? But like, we need the mute button. It's like, what is happening?
I literally just threw my phone across the room.
Well, you didn't have to do that. You could just put it on silent or something, brother. But
it's for effect. I want to let the people know we're in this. Thank you for bringing that up. So that's my take. That's my take on tight end premium. I think 0.5 makes a lot of sense. I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to crazy out. I don't want to do like a 2 tight end league. That would be a fun like nuance. Like, hey, this is a really specific league. We're all in a lot of other leagues. This is kind of a hyper specific, weird. Let's solve it. Have some fun rule set. I think 0.5 is, how 2 wide receivers became 3 wide receivers in competitive fantasy football for the most part because of how the player distribution from talented point producing players in the NFL at the position made sense. There's just less producing RBs than there is wide receivers. It made sense to do. I think giving the tight ends a little bit of a bump because pass catching as a tight end means you are good enough at the skill set, and getting the catch as a tight end should have a little bit of a bump because the fact that the team is scheming you open to some degree. This is cheap for Pittman. I gotta pay attention here.
Go ahead. Go ahead and jump in on Pittman here. I have Pittman in a lot of places.
I don't need to. He's cheap.
Oh no, I have a take here. And I'll be honest. Then there's actually some good questions in the chat that I want to get to here in just a second. I just entered my first 2 tight end league. What did Pittman just go for? I didn't see him come off the board.
Very happy.
What did he go for? $47. What a pick, Kendall. Man, that's a great deal. What a great deal on that. And I know who you're targeting at quarterback, so fantastic.
Yeah, $1. I just spent $100 on Breece Hall. I am targeting Brock Purdy's little brother, who will be drafted in a couple years. Okay,
exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Hope that made sense to everybody.
Is this a Devi draft? Can I get Arch Manning for $2, please? How's that going to work out? So, here's your boy. So sorry. So I just entered my first start 2 tight end, and I'm historically a big tight end punter. I don't necessarily believe in paying up at the position. I don't think that it's a player that, in the heyday of Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, where they were finishing what would have equated to the wide receiver 3 overall, they were effectively the wide receiver 1s for their team, right? Like that was kind of how they were viewed. And so like, to me, Sam Laporta, we've talked about this, but like Sam Laporta, tight end 1 as a rookie, overall tight end 1 as a rookie. I mean, I get it, but can he do that again in an offense with Amon-Ra and an offense where Jameson Williams is being talked up, in an offense where we expect Jahmyr Gibbs to get a You got Rome? There you go. What a price. Wow, what a price.
Shame on all of you. Shame on everyone in this draft.
That was a steal. What a great pid.
You guys want to see me suffer. That's what you guys want to see me as a Bears fan. If Rome were to get injured.
What are you doing? Don't speak that into existence. Come on, man.
You got it. You know what? This is one. You know how you never waste the first take. We talk football so much. We're like careful to like give our best takes in chat.
Yeah.
Because like we want to save it for this. This is I'm getting the worst take out of the way. Okay, I want to see how it felt.
All right.
Scared the crap out of me. By the way, Steele and Ayuk $51. You guys caught us talking.
Yep. I didn't see that one.
Can someone else price fix while we're giving takes? Can someone monitor the damn draft and make sure that players don't go for that cheap, guys? What are we doing here?
Stuff going on here. I know. Smokey the Cat here in the chat has a great Smokey the Cat in the chat there. I love that. No, not intended, but we'll love it. has a fantastic question, and I want to get to it, but I'm also like, wait a minute, if we're going to start talking about this because it's such a good question, am I going to miss out on some players that I need to be bidding on here?
You know, we got some cool people in the chat. They're asking good questions. They're fun.
Let's get to Smokey
they're
here.
In the draft. Here's the thing: flip it back on them. Okay, they need to be distracted as much as we are.
No kidding, my man. So we got Smokey the Cat here
Poker tournament's not affecting your draft. You're fine.
Smokey the Cat asking, hey guys, trade Cooper Kupp, Mark Andrews, and a 2025 first to get Dotson, Laporta, and Charbonnet. Kendall, I'll let you go first on that question. Which side, again, for those that can't see the board or can't see the screen here because they're just listening on Patreon or on Spotify, Smokey the Cat would be trading away Cooper Kupp, Mark Andrews, and his 2025 first. He would be receiving Jahan Dotson, Sam Laporta, and Zach Charbonnet. Which side do you lean in that trade, Kendall?
Sure. If I am competing and I want to win a title to some degree, you know, I know there's nuance here. I'm keeping Kupp, Andrews in the first if I'm competing.
Yep.
Because I think Kupp is undervalued currently. He's going to be a big producer, and Andrews, I think, will outscore Laporta as a tight end this season, straight up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think most sharps are actually on that. So, yeah, if I'm competing, I'm keeping the two producers.
Yeah.
And the first, which never happens, which kind of makes me lean. I think I'm just keeping that side because it's better if you're competing. I'm not saying if you're rebuilding, you should do this because it's not like a rebuild question. It's like, if you're not competing, do I take the most valuable asset in the trade that will not depreciate in the same way that clearly Kupp and Andrews will? This is kind of interesting because the best appreciating asset is the 2025 first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting in that if I'm competing, I want that side. But if I'm also hardcore rebuilding and selling everything, I'd rather have that too. And if when the playoff time comes, it's not looking like it, I'm selling Andrews and I'm selling Kupp. That side, if you're telling me this is preseason, I'm taking the Kupp, Andrews in 2025 first. It allows you better sides of all outcomes and more additional flexibility, if I'm being honest. So I think that side's a clear winner to some degree in all aspects.
Yeah, I it's interesting because, like, to me, the balance of who these players are kind of doesn't make sense. To your point about, like, if I'm building for the future, obviously I want Kupp off my team because of the age. Andrews, I would still take Mark Andrews. I still have him as a top 3 tight end, even with his quote unquote older age. But the 2025 first to me is the interesting part of the draft. I agree with you 100%. That is the most appreciating of it's not a player yet, but it will become a player. But look, Sam Laporta, tight end 1. I agree with you, Mark Andrews. I would probably, in a vacuum, I would obviously take Laporta over Andrews because of the age and upside. But for a rebuild for this season, not for a rebuild, for a team that's competing this season, I'd rather have Andrews. I still see him as the clear number 1 wide receiver target in that offense for Lamar Jackson. Zach Charbonnet, to me, we just saw, if you're tracking the draft, we just saw Kenneth Walker, KW3, come off the board for $45. So pretty good price actually here. I like Mike McDonald. I think he's going to bring a lot of the scheme that Greg Roman had, with the Ravens over to Seattle. I think they're going to run the ball a ton. They've already been a historically kind of a run first team. I just don't see the path for Zach Charbonnet to displace KW3 outside of injury, right? Like, he's not a player that got a ton of work his rookie season. He didn't really take a ton of snap share from Walker. I like Dotson. I believe that there is, I will say, not maybe a full bounce back of his value, but I do think that he is trending up in terms of what he could be in Washington with Cliff Kingsbury and with Jaden Daniels. But to me, Smokey, I would hold, if this is your team, and I assume it is, if you're asking trading Kupp, Andrews in the first, I would hold the Kupp, Andrews first side. I might look to just flip Kupp and see if I couldn't find someone that would give me, Kendall, I know you and I go a lot about player value, maybe a second. I think there's still some folks out there, especially maybe a win now team as we get into the second half of the season, closer to playoff time, that could potentially be looking to get a Cooper Kupp and inject, some touchdowns and potentially obviously more yards into their roster.
I'd be careful about a second only because if you're giving Kupp away for a second, you're making their team immediately a lot better. without making it a bit worse. Their second is going to get devalued by a reasonable amount. If they're making plays to make their team really good, you could look at it and say the roster right now is somewhere in the middle, decent second. By the end of their trading and selling, or I say buying in this case, this could be, the 209, 210, which I think there's a steep downward spiral in the second round, mid versus late. I think there's players that just your queue runs out in the second, in my opinion, in most years. And so I think you should just be careful about selling Cup now. Only interjecting here because I think Cup is an asset that the market is below where his production profile should be for the years he has left, in my opinion. And I think Cup's a guy where if you just wait 3 weeks into the season for him to put up 3 20-point games, which would not be absurd at all of a sudden he's worth the first again. So I think he's a hold for me.
Okay.
At least when you look at this trade, it's where do all the players in this trade, what is their off-season narrative? What is their most likely, think of redraft. This is where Dynasty and redraft, you need to play both. Where does Cup go in redraft? He is consistently making sleepers list for redraft. A lot of sharps are saying, guys, Cup is being undervalued because all the Dynasty bros are off on him.
Agreed.
But he could be legendary in redraft this season. He's just slept on. When he's legendary in redraft.
Excuse me for my celebration and my interruption of your point there.
You happy over there?
You know what just happened.
Dude,
take a look at the board and you just tell me why I'm excited.
Because you have 3 fantastic wide receivers with a stack.
And I paid for it. Yeah, I'm very pleased with what that just happened there.
Hey, you got a team name too, man. What can Brown do for you?
I'll be honest with you, man. I actually put Josh Allen on the board to drive the price up. I did not intend to win him. I was a little surprised I got him. I'm kicking myself because I said, do not go get an expensive quarterback. Go and get a cheap quarterback late on. And I just did exactly what I said I'm not going to do. But now that I look at my team and I'm like, you know what? Fantasy football should be fun. I won't talk about the price. This is not a big, huge money league. So this should be enjoyable. I want to root for guys that I like. This is going to be a lot of fun, this team, at least the way it's shaping out so far. I wanted to go back because as I was bidding on Keon Coleman there, I was listening to you. I think you just made a phenomenal point that really everyone should pay attention to, regardless of what format they are playing in when it comes to trading, especially in a dynasty format where you're trading futures. You need to look at what I love that you just said about Cup not being maybe worth a second because he could potentially rise back into that first. When you are trading a player away, you do need to consider what that is doing to the other team because that first, second, third round pick that you're getting back is potentially going to be higher or lower depending on the player that you've actually sent away, right? So, for example, we just saw that Bijan trade go down this morning. Bijan in the third, the team that acquired JT in the first, that first is probably on paper going to be a lower first round pick because of the injection of Bijan, and that team was already pretty good. Now we haven't seen the full roster, but at the end of the day, I think that's something that people really need to pay attention to is what am I giving up? What am I gaining? And this first, even though it's a first on paper, to your point earlier about 10 and 12 team leagues, a second round pick that's the 201 is the 112. Right. So that's something to keep in mind as well is what is this going to do to a team that's going to impact the pick that I've received? So we'll get into trades and values for those trades in a future show. I know you and I have talked a lot about trades and that's how we became friends, but I think that's what dynasty players really want to hear is, content wise, what are these players really worth? What are these picks really worth? How do I know if I'm getting a great deal? Because look, you can jump on Keep Trade Cut and go through their trade calculator. And I use that too. It's a barometer as a price check to make sure I'm not getting completely taken where, am I missing something?
It's good for Market Watch. It's not a trade calculator. Keep Trade Cut is better than a trade calculator. It tells you the ideas that the market has in little, tiny, small snapshots. It tells you what's crazy and what has been concocted before. For me, Keep Trade Cut is clearly like you said, it's a barometer, but it's also am I out of line or am I not out of line? It tells you when you're out of line and when you're not, and it gives you a range, which I think is more valuable than a trade calculator whose staticness can hurt you because it's only taking a moment of time. And to play Dynasty is evergreen, baby. It lasts forever. Play the stock market like a pro and look at a 2 to 3 year window. And if you look at the values over 2 to 3 years of window,
yes,
Dynasty trade calculator is not going to be able to take that into account to any extent.
Yep.
Right.
And I would say this, because this is really important as well. If you use keep trade cut, remember, if you're in a 10-team league, it does not factor that in. It assumes everything is a 12-team league. So you have to make the adjustments on your own to say, well, if I'm getting a 2025 mid first, that actually might be a 2025 late first because you're in a 10-team league. So I'm not a huge proponent of trade calculators. To your point, I do think they are a good price check, barometer, health check. Hey, am I way out of line for thinking that Patrick Mahomes is worth, insert player names here? Or is the market, way off and maybe I'm getting a deal here, I'm getting a value at a player that somebody's not really seeing. So I struggle with it. We all know that there's I won't say guys because there could be women as well, and we all know there's folks in our leagues who will send you, hey, but keep trade cut says this is a fair trade. Great, man, I don't see the value in it. Or great, that's awesome, I don't want that trade. So to me,
or the inverse is like keep trade cut says this is terrible.
Right. It's exactly right.
Look, I'll be the first one to say I have sent some terrible trade offers.
We all
not
have.
sorry for it. I'm not sorry for it. Okay. I'll be the first one to say, I'll tell a lot of people, yeah, I was expecting counters, but I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to negotiate against myself when I'm just trying to start a conversation. Totally hear where you're at. Next time I'll just shoot you a chat message. We can kind of start from there. Didn't mean to offend you. Right. I'm not going to negotiate.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to get though. You're going to get the man. This says you're way out of line. It's like, well, if that's the way you're thinking. You're not thinking. Trade calculator's thinking for you. Think critically, think analytically. If anything, here's how you use a trade calculator, okay? In your mind, go by tiers, formulate like a general range of outcomes, give yourself a, hey, what's like most, least, and like kind of median probable for like where this kind of plays out in the player ranges, right? And then tell yourself where you think the value kind of is. If you were to be the calculator, where do you think it is? Then go check the calculator and see where the calculator says you're off.
Love that.
And then show your work, rework it. Say, you know what? Here's how you can identify. This is actually really important. This is how you can identify good trades where the trade calculator says you are getting boned. And sometimes you're not. Like, think for yourself, follow the narrative, and then think how you win and how probable it is and how probable it is over. Just don't go 3 years, go 2.
Yeah.
Just go this year plus next. And then that's how you make more educated decisions. What you'll find is you'll be able to make trade offers and counters quicker with a little bit more confidence, right? And it's going to make your fantasy experience better. I have been in a position where when I was younger, when I was more inexperienced, I didn't want to get screwed and not enjoy the process. So I would have to, it was paralysis analysis, right? I had to check all the things beforehand. It's such a more fun, freeing existence in fantasy. You'll enjoy it more. And this is a sport we pay to play until we win. And it's hard to win. You lose a lot until you win. That's kind of how this sport is. And it's fun, right? But it's cover charge. It's price of admission. When you're able to level your game up a little bit and think in those terms, it sucks a little bit because you'll probably lose a little bit. You're probably going to make a bad trade once or twice because it is what it is. But if you're looking at it the right way, where it's like you're thinking critically, right? Hopefully, maybe listening to us a little bit, and then using the calculator just as a leveling tool, as a balancer, as a little bit of a metronome to just kind of keep you in the pocket.
Yep.
That's the better way to go. But you'll have a much more fun fantasy football experience. And look, absolutely, you can be better than a calculator. This is not. A lot of folks here play poker. You can't beat a poker solver. You just can't. It's GTO at its finest doesn't give off tells, and so you can't really beat it in the long run, right? You can beat a trade calculator very easily. Yeah, all the time.
I love it. I mean, to me, the key component of what you just said there is think for yourself, think critically, right? Like that's why a lot of us get into dynasty football is because it is different game theory. It's a different strategy. At the end of the day, it is not something, unfortunately, that you can win every year. Whereas redraft, you can win your league every season. And obviously in Dynasty, there's just some years, I did a show a couple weeks ago featuring one of my own teams. I'm in a rebuild. I just don't have the roster that can win this season. I've got some really good young pieces that I'm building around. I've got a ton. Obviously, it's a rebuild, so I've got a ton of future picks. But the truth is, with that team, it's just not going to happen for me this season. But I think it's more fun because I'm making way more trades. I'm way more active in the market than I would be if I was just looking for one or two pieces to push me over the top. So, Kendall, as we get ready to sign off and wrap up here, tell the folks where they can find you.
Yeah, so come check out my YouTube channel over at the Fantasy Football Tavern. We're a little bit new to the space, so production quality. Look, it ain't great, but the takes are fantastic. You will win a disproportionately ridiculous amount of your leagues and trades if you come watch. Things I specialize in. I just did a really nice buy low, sell high series on Dynasty.
Yeah, that was great. Those were great.
I'm a big market watch guy. I think it's valuable for you folks if you're in a Dynasty league and you kind of want to see at any snapshot in time what players the market might be over or under reacting to. I kind of give my takes and feelings on those players at each position that we can take advantage of in terms of buy low, sell high windows. But I'm really a big mock drafter. I love the fun Rubik's Cube that is mock drafts. I believe that my set of rankings, your set of rankings, it doesn't necessarily matter because there's a way to solve the draft in an optimal way based on your set of rankings and player values. So regardless of what ranking set we're using, we can still kind of win the draft when it comes to where the market's at. So I do a lot of mock drafts. We're going to be doing some underdog best ball drafts coming up, a lot of dynasty startups. And then when we get into redraft, we'll be doing quite a bit of that as well. So come check me out. I'm new. Me and Phil are pretty fun guys to hang out with. We're going to do a lot of live streaming. So if not, come check out the videos. Come be one of the community. Drop a comment and then come hang out definitely in one of the live streams. It would be super fun to get in a league with one of you guys one of these days. Phil starts like a league a week. I don't know how he does it. That's
a little aggressive.
But you start a lot of leagues, man.
I've got a lot going on. Yeah.
Of like all of them, and I love it. But Phil, seriously, he's very dedicated. His channel is partly dedicated to helping folks who want to get into Dynasty or are already into Dynasty but want to get into a more competitive league, or they want to get to a different, more fun, engaging league. Yep. Phil's a great resource for that. I help him out with that. Not that he needs it. But anyways, come check me out, the Fantasy Football Tavern. We'd love to have you. If anything, we're going to have a few cocktails and have a good time. And go check out Phil as well.
I appreciate it, man. Kendall, my brother, always good to have you on the show. Always good to talk to you. If you're not on the show, we text all the time, and love your takes, man. Love your approach to the game and how you see things similarly to me, and then how you see things very differently than me. And that's, I think, what makes it fun is some of that contrast. So for the folks that are wrapping up here, thanks for joining another episode of The Extra Point. Next week, we will be back to our regular scheduled day, Thursday nights at 7 p.m. You can catch my live stream. You can also follow along, or listen along, I should say, on Spotify and Patreon. And thanks for joining another episode of The Extra Point. Y'all have a great week and enjoy the rest of this draft for the drafters.